All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday, everybody's favorite day, last day of the week. Yeah, let's say good morning to some people who are here. So Blake's here. Good morning, Blake. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Michelle is here. Good morning, Michelle. Irene is here. Good morning, Irene. Hadil is here. Good morning, Hadil. And Adon is here. Hello. Good morning. Yesterday, we'll hop in here. Yesterday, of course, we were talking about China, and we were finishing off, well, mostly finishing off talking about our good friend here, Confucius, right? And we said he was kind of a philosopher that was born and raised during this warring states period, right? A period in Chinese history where things are pretty chaotic, lots of warfare is happening, kings are being kicked out and kingdoms are being taken over and then retaken over again. You know, as I say, there's death, there's fighting, there's confusion. It's a period of kind of political chaos, right? And usually those periods of political chaos lead to other kinds of chaos as well, like economic and social chaos. And so Confucius was wondering, well, how can we end this, right? How can we create a society that is peaceful and just and good for everyone, right? And so we said that he kind of, to answer this question, he looked backwards, right? He went back into Chinese history and was inspired by the Zhou dynasty, which he saw as kind of a golden age of Chinese history, right? When people were noble and good and, acted in a morally correct manner, and everything was so much better under the Zhou. And again, whether that's true or not is kind of maybe a little questionable. People tend to look at the past with rose-colored glasses, if you will. They tend to look at the past with nostalgia, and they tend to remember it as better than it actually was. But regardless of whether or not the Zhou period was perfect, it did inspire Confucius to pull a few things from that period and reinterpret them for the modern world, right? And so on yesterday, one of the things that we were talking about is what were some of his beliefs, what were some of his values, and how did he kind of reimagine sort of Zhou period values in the time that he was in. And so we heard a little bit about music, right? So our narrator Bethany was in amongst all of those bronze bells, and Confucius was a fan of music, right? He said music has the power to harmonize and perfect an individual, right? In a way, to play an instrument or to play a piece of music, especially with other musicians, is really all about some of the things that Confucius was talking about, right? Doing things accurately and correctly and in the appropriate time, and cooperating with other people, right? Again, if you don't do those things when you're playing music, you're not really playing music, you're just making a bunch of noise, right? In the second part of the documentary yesterday, we heard a little bit about what Confucius thought his mission was, and he was actually trying to change society, right? And he decided he was going to change society, not quite from the top up, well, actually a little later on from the top up, but he was going to do it by trying to get people to follow individual moral values, right? If everyone acted like a moral, virtuous person, then you would have a moral, virtuous society, right? You don't have to build the structure in, you just get people to act properly, and then you'll have a good society. Which actually, when you phrase it that way, seems a little naive, but that seems to have been his idea, right? And so we said he was inspired by the Zhou. He was also inspired by families, right? He knew that families had kind of power relationships within them, and those power relationships also had obligations within them, right? So yes, fathers had power over sons, for instance, and sons had a duty to respect and obey the father. But there were also obligations involved, right? The father had an obligation to be a good role model, right? To be someone who looked after and cared for and inspired their son, right? And similarly, the son was supposed to obey the father, maybe to make the father proud, but also to honor and respect the father. And so these kind of power relationships they weren't based on violence and brutality, right? It wasn't do what I say or I'll cut off your head, right? It wasn't based on that. It was do what I say because I am a role model for you and I care about you, and you in turn care about me, right? And so he tried to create a system that would extend this sort of system of power and obligation within the family and extend that to the state. And so, yeah, rulers shouldn't act, like spoiled brats. Rulers should act as the role models and the caretakers of the people that the father is within the family, right? That's kind of what Confucius was going for. But again, if the ruler is not acting in a virtuous way and the people are suffering, you can rebel, you can overthrow him. Talked a little bit about how Confucius selected his students, and we said it was meritocratic, right? So anyone who wanted to learn and agreed to work hard, he would teach, right? He didn't worry so much about economic class or if people had money or not, but he was not entirely meritocratic because it seems like he didn't have a lot of space for women, right? There's not a lot of mention of women in his writings, and there doesn't seem to have been any female students of Confucius as well. So yeah, he was meritocratic, I guess, in an economic sense, but not in a gender sense, right? And again, that's probably something that was very in alignment with the culture at the time. It's not that Confucius was a huge sexist. To imagine him that way is to be guilty of presentism, right? By looking and judging the figures of the past through our present eyes. And so he probably wasn't much different from most Chinese men of the day back thousands of years ago. But still, he didn't spend a lot of time thinking about women and their place in society and what they should or shouldn't be doing. We said that Confucius' students sharpen their intellectual skills through debate, right? Basically through argumentation. They would ask a question and then create an argument, right? That's an answer to it. And then they would basically try to kind of find fault with each other's argument. And that way they could clarify their understandings and their answers to those questions. And again, that's kind of interesting because it's happening 2,000 years ago, and it's still a useful skill for discovering the truth of things, right? If you want to find the truth of things, create arguments based on logic and try to invalidate them, right? Try to test those arguments and see if they really are solid. And so this is what his students are doing, building and evaluating each other's arguments, right? And so one of the questions that came up yesterday is, is it a good idea? Is it good to serve a corrupt master if you think you can make a difference, right? And so, yeah, think of someone working for Donald Trump. I'm going to assume that all of you are good, moral, upstanding people. Would you work for Donald Trump if you thought you could make a difference? In a better way. Because he was a wrecking ball of a human being, right? But would you work for him if you thought somehow you could, try to minimize his impact or try to point him in the right direction or just try and minimize the harm to the state that Trump was causing? Would you work for him? You certainly can, but is it the right thing to do? Is it morally correct to do so?
pushing hard away from others?
True, but I wonder as well. Well, yeah, I guess this is part of the argument, is that if nobody agreed to help him at all, then he really wouldn't be able to do anything, right? So in helping him, in working for him, you are enabling him to do, to some degree, what he wants to do.
But like in some way, like he's gonna do it with me or without me.
Yes, but he can't do everything alone, right? Like he needs assistance, right? Adolf Hitler killed 7 million Jewish people during the Holocaust, but he didn't do it on his own, right? He had a lot of help, right? People in Germany made that happen, and so this is not a I told you in social justice class, do not make comparisons to Hitler or the Nazis, because 95% of the time those comparisons are not good. And what did I just do? I just did it. But I think it's valid in this case. So the political leader can't do everything by himself. He needs people to work for him in order to get things done. And so lots of people in the Trump White House did help Trump to get things done. But again, is it morally right to work for him if you think you can kind of minimize his impact? Or is it better just to walk away and say, no, I'm not helping you in any way. You are a morally corrupt person.
But like if I do not get it and I have some help or change, there are a lot of people like who wants to come and they deal with his idea and make it more worse.
Yeah.
And that way I could prevent something from happening.
That's a great counter argument, right? If I don't work for him, somebody else will, and that someone might not be as morally upstanding as me, right? They might have values in alignment with Trump, and then there'll be nobody to protect the state or the people. So at least if I work for him, I'll be able to try to stop bad things from happening as best I can. Yeah. But anyway, that's the kind of things that they were discussing, right? Yeah, we said the most difficult virtue to attain was Ren, right? Was human-heartedness or humanity. And so, and would you agree? Because what they were saying was this is the most difficult thing to truly attain. And both Confucius and many of his students, when asked, said that actually no, we haven't attained to this state yet. Would you agree that this is kind of the hardest virtue to attain? Huh? Can I explain? Ren? Yeah, so it's to look at the world through human eyes, right? And so to make decisions based on compassion and empathy toward other humans, right? Can you put aside your ego? Can you put aside your feelings and make decisions based on what is good for other people? And what's that? It is hard, especially when, if you think about people that you really don't like, right? With people that you like or you love, yeah, that's far easier, right? But for people that you don't know or you don't like or you really strongly dislike, that's really difficult to do, right? To make decisions and to treat them with humanity, right? Especially when maybe they don't do the same for you, right? That's really difficult to do. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting concept, is that, the lowest, the basic requirement is that you're human, but actually to act with humanity is something that is incredibly difficult to do sometimes, right? And there are many, many examples of people not acting with humanity. Nice idea, though. I personally, if I may say so, I really like this idea of his, and particularly because I'm not a very religious person, and so I like that he can suggest this without kind of a religious backing, right? Without, there's really no God behind Confucius telling, this is what God says, so this is what we should do. I like it because he's saying, yeah, just look at other people, right? And don't treat them in ways that you don't want to be treated, right? And it's not really based on commandments or threats of punishment in the afterlife or anything like that. He just looks out and says, just behave toward people in a way that you would want people to behave toward you. And again, it's a very simple idea to say, but in practice it's a very difficult thing to do. Again, especially when you're dealing with people who you just don't like very much. Yeah, I didn't have to say that, but I just thought I would throw it in that I really like this idea from him.
He's assuming human nature is innately good for his argument, but he can't necessarily prove that.
Well, no, and I don't know. Do you think that? So Mulder just kind of stated. Do you think that one of the, I'm going to use some language here, one of the implicit premises of Confucius's argument is that humans are actually good, right? At their sort of basic level, humans are good creatures. Do you think that's true? Or do you think that's true, or do you think that that's actually something that Confucius believes?
He did.
Oh, he did? Okay. Okay, so he did believe that. So do you think that's true? Do you think humans are innately good?
In what way?
How did you know that?
In way of inventing, in way of dealing with others, in way of adapting.
In what? Yeah. In what does good mean, right? What do you think he's talking about here, in terms of humans are good, or what are you talking about?
He's assuming that everyone would be good. It's unrealistic to assume that, to want that is unrealistic.
It's unrealistic to assume that.
Humans are good and he wants everyone to behave with virtue, and that is unrealistic.
Perhaps a little bit. Although I will say that lots of very worthy things to aspire to are not realistic. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Will we ever have a perfect society? Hard to imagine. Should we try anyway? Maybe. Yeah. So, but do you think? Yeah. Do you think humans are good? And what does that mean? How do we measure what's good?
It's all your actions can benefit everyone else, not just yourself.
Okay, so how your behavior benefits other people, right? Or the degree of benefit that it gives other people. Yeah, I think that's probably part of it. Maybe the opposite side is that, the degree of suffering that your actions causes, right? Maybe you should always work to minimize the suffering of others if you can, right? What's that? Sacrificing? Okay, so giving up things that you might want in order for what other people want or need. Yeah. Yeah, that's the suffering thing. I was going to say that's what doctors say in their Hippocratic oath, right? The first thing is you do no harm, right? Before anything, don't hurt the person, right? And that's so everything in theory, everything that doctors do is supposed to be based on this idea of whatever you do not hurt them, right? Do not harm them in any way. Yeah, are humans good?
They're good. You know how it is.
Or are they just blank slates? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they nothing until they're taught something?
They're not completely good, they're not completely bad, or mostly bad.
No, nothing is completely anything. But
Sure.
if you had to, yeah, I know nothing is completely anything and everything depends on something else, but if you had to say, do you think humans are innately good or are they innately bad and we have to train them to be good? You think they're bad? They're good, but they can be misled. Absolutely. Yeah. What did you say, Nicholas?
She just said they're nothing until they're taught something.
In many cases, yeah, we don't really know anything about what to do until we're taught something. But we do have a little bit of wiring.
No, because we were all kids at one point, right?
As far as I am aware, unless some of you are robots.
And that's why we are most when we are most easily influenced.
Yes.
So if a kid's experiences and their environment are shitty, then they're gonna grow up as shitty person. If they're not, then they'll grow up as good humans. I'd say.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so it's the nature or nurture argument, right? So are people bad, or do they just come from bad circumstances, right? I'm going to use Hitler again. See, I'm breaking my own rules. Hitler was certainly a bad person in the end. In the final analysis, he's a bad person.
Yeah,
but did he start out that way?
No, because at the time, I think Hitler was born when Germany was having a rough time, right?
He was born.
They lost the World War I and then.
I think he was no. Well, he was a young man then. I think he was born in 1899.
Yeah, so he had a shitty. He had a bad experience at one point, right? So
Well, we've all had bad experiences.
he had extremely bad.
I'm having one now. No, I'm just kidding.
He had an extremely bad experience because they lost they lost at World War I, right?
Mhm.
And they had to pay a lot of things.
Yeah.
For their actions.
Yeah.
And they were economically doing really bad. So because of that, he had extremely bad experiences, which made him believe what he believed.
True. Historically accurate, right? Germany had a rough time in World War I, and after World War I, things really got worse for them. That is historically accurate. Nice work. However, he's the only one who went out and killed 7 million people. So, again, not everyone has the same reaction to bad things they go through. And again, does going through bad things absolve you of responsibility for your actions? That's actually a whole other question.
Well, are you considering him a bad because of my journey?
I'm considering him bad because, well, this is actually the measure of the criteria for good, right? I'm measuring him as bad because he was responsible for the suffering and brutal death of millions and millions of people for no other reason than their ethnicity. That's how I judge him. He was responsible for that.
He was the result, he was not the cause.
He was the reason, not the cause?
He was the result.
Oh, the result.
Yeah. He's not the cause. Why don't you talk about Mussolini?
Yeah, you could talk about Mussolini.
Yeah, like the French leader at that time. They founded a leader.
There's many historical examples of people who cause other people to suffer. It's not hard to find them, for sure.
I think power seems
reason for them to be bad. Like when they're in power, they tend to abuse it. It seems to be doing it.
Power has a way of yeah, so Confucius is saying here that yeah, you should do everything in accordance with humanity, right? You should do everything according to, what would you like how would you like other people to treat you, right? But it is interesting that, the more power that people get, sometimes the more disconnected they become from their humanity and the less empathetic they become. And I don't know, I think that's true, but I don't know why. I don't know why it's true, but I feel like it is.
What I think is because for their power, they interact less with actual people, so they kind of perhaps dehumanize them so that they can exploit them.
Yeah, there's a dehumanization, right, or an exploitation. There's a great story, and I have slides on this. I talk about it in my anthropology class that I teach, and it's a little story by an anthropologist named Richard Lee, and Richard was doing his anthropological fieldwork in with these hunter-gatherers in Africa called the Juhosani. That's their group name. He was doing field work with them, and at the end he spent 6 or 8 months living with these people and helping them and learning their language and asking them about their culture and basically writing a book, right, about the culture of the Juhosani people. So he was there for a long time, and finally at the end of his field work he was going to leave, and he wanted to say thank you to these people because these people had taken care of him and helped him and been kind to him and befriended him, and so he wanted to say thank you. And so he went into the nearest town and he bought an ox, like a big cow, and his plan was he was going to bring the ox back to the camp and say, look, I wanted to say thank you to everybody. You've been so, you've taken me into your homes and you've fed me and you've looked after me, and let's slaughter this ox, cook it up, and have a big party, right? And the people would have eaten the ox. So so ox is an acceptable food. And so this is his plan. And then once some of the Juhosani people found out that he had bought this ox and he was going to present it to the group as a gift, they started making fun of him, interestingly. And they were like, oh, that ox? We can't eat that thing. It's all skin and bones. Right? Like, what do you expect us to eat? The horns? Can't eat that thing. And so they teased him about it. And he kind of laughed it off. He's like, oh, yeah, that's a good one. But inside, he's kind of thinking, like, what the hell? Like, I was going to give this nice gift, and everyone's making fun of me. And so he went to one of his Juhosani friends who had been helping him, and he said, hey, look, I was just talking to these people about the ox, and they were making fun of me. Like, why were they doing that? And his friend explained to him that, what the Juhosani felt he was trying to do, he was trying to put himself above them, right? He was trying to sort of make himself more, look how grand I am. I can give you this ox and you can all eat, right? And it was this aggrandizing thing. And Baha's giving me a kind of a confused look, but this is how the Juhosani, this is how they interpreted that act. That's not what he was trying to do, but that's how they saw it. And so his friend explained to him that, when a hunter kills an animal and sort of shares it, we always speak of his meat as worthless, right? Because we don't want him to think he is better than everyone else. We don't want him to think that he is above everyone else, because that pride will result in him treating other people poorly. So anytime someone puts themselves above the group and thinks that they're all that, we kind of bring them back down, right? We make sure that nobody gets too, their ego doesn't get too inflated. Nobody gets too high on themselves, because they know that it's socially destructive, right? When people start to gain power, when they start to think they're better than other people, they start to dehumanize others. They start to treat others not in accordance with humanity, right? And so that's why they teased Richard Lee and his ox, because it wasn't that they were jerks. It was because they know that power and people trying to put themselves above other people is socially destructive, and it causes problems for them. And so it's interesting. What we're talking about here is something that probably Confucius understood, and I think that we understand, and I think the Juhosani that Richard Lee was studying, they understood it as well, right? They knew that power corrupts, right? They understood that, even though they were kind of living a very simple hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle, they kind of intuitively knew that people gaining power over others was a recipe for conflict and disaster.
Right. It could be taught like the difference between giving for thanking and giving for being for showing off.
Well, and that's
They say thank you.
yes, but that's cultural, right? So there are different cultural ideas around the giving of the gift. And in fact, if you ever take introductory anthropology, you might hear about Marcel Mauss. And Marcel Mauss is an anthropologist who actually wrote a whole book called The Gift, right? Where he talks all about the sort of cultural ideas and practices around the giving of gifts, right? And how gifts are given, how they're received, how they should be repaid, what they mean, what kind of things are acceptable to do when you have received a gift. There's all kinds of different things connected to it. And so, yeah, you're kind of expressing part of your culture there, and mine too, that when you're given a gift, it's nice to just say thank you and say, yes, thank you for this generous gift. You're so kind, right? But for the Juhosani, gift giving is seen a little bit differently, or at least this particular gift was seen differently. And it could have been the fact that it was just quite large, right? The gift of an ox was a large gift. It could have had to do with the fact that it was meat, that was food. Could have had to do with the fact that Richard Lee was kind of an outsider. He was a white anthropologist. He wasn't one of the Juhosani people. Probably had to do with all kinds of things. And so, yeah, as I say, gift giving is something that seems very simple, but if you look at it cross-culturally, it's actually a very complicated practice, and it's tied to a lot of different things. But yeah, it is nice to say thank you. For us, anyway. But yeah, so Confucius is kind of talking about this idea, and it's difficult, right? It is difficult to act with empathy. It is difficult to act with goodness at all times, right? But that's what he's asking people to aspire to, and it's probably unrealistic as well, right? It's unrealistic to expect that any person could act with kindness and virtue and empathy and humanity in all times, in every case, right? That's not a realistic thing. Humans are imperfect creatures, but it doesn't mean it's not worth trying. I think that's what he's saying anyway. We also talked about the fact that his ideas become popularized later, right? So his students continue to teach his ideas after his death, and sadly when he dies, he feels like he's failed, right? He's like, I tried to change society, nothing happened, right? Epic fail. Kind of a sad way to die, but maybe his spirit was comforted later because, again, his ideas did get picked up and they were used for exactly what Confucius wanted them to be used for, to create a stable, peaceful society, right? So those things were picked up in the Han, and they kind of worked their way into Chinese culture. And again, you could look at this in a little more of from a little more jaded of a perspective and say that yes, these rulers were just trying to, get people to follow the rules and behave. But really, all leaders want that, right? All leaders want their people to follow the rules and behave. The question is, how are you going to get that to happen? So yeah, the Han Dynasty sees the usefulness of Confucian ideas in sort of binding people together and getting them to follow the rules. By the way, that's another thing that leaders need to do, is they need to create some way to make sure that everybody in the country or the state feels like they're on the same team, right? You need to create some sort of national identity or character or goal or something that says that we're all in this together and we're all cooperating.
Yeah, otherwise they're gonna storm the temple.
Otherwise they will storm the Capitol, right? That's part of nation building, right? Nation building is we're all in this together. We're all Americans or Canadians or whatever country you're talking about, and we're going to do this together, right? And of course, Donald Trump didn't understand that because there's a lot of things he doesn't understand. But part of the leader's job is to build that unity, right? To get people to work together. And we saw that from Joe Biden almost immediately, right? Even in his inauguration speech, he was talking about unity. We're all in this together. You know, we're going to fix this. We're going to be great. We're going to move forward. Not great again. That's another slogan. But that's part of the job of the leader. And the Han emperors were kind of doing a little bit of that, as do all leaders have to do. And yeah, even Joe Biden was doing the same thing. What's that?
This could be like having all the people doing like extreme nationalists. It's gonna be very dangerous.
Well, yeah, and we're going to talk about Hitler again here, which is third time.
We can talk about the Communist Party.
Sure.
Like, they literally have tanks running over students, and the Chinese, like most Chinese citizens, are just gonna say that never happened.
Yeah. So there's a nation building is an important part of running a state, right? Getting everybody to kind of feel similarly and feel like they're on the same team. But it's definitely it's a dangerous mix, right? It can go too far, right? To the point where the good of the state is superior and the rights of individuals are an afterthought. And that's kind of what we see sometimes with communist authoritarian countries, is that the good of the state, whatever that is superior, is above human rights and even human life. We see it in Nazi Germany, where the idea that the German race is pure and noble and virtuous, that idea gets taken to an extreme, to the point where they start executing people who are not German, right? And so yeah, it's a dangerous game if you go too far with it, right? But I think all countries have to do some amount of nation building a national story, a national identity, something that allows people to feel like we're all part of the same thing here. But yeah, you're right, it can get out of control, right, if it goes too far. Did I ask you anything else? I did not. I would like you to read this section from the textbook, but do you want to take a little break first? Okay, early break. I'll get you to read a few pages. It's a bit of review of what we already know, but you might pick up a few more tidbits. Then I have some film to show you. Yes. What's that? Not this one. This one's kind of a different one, but you'll see when we get back. Oh, what happened there? Okay, hang on a sec. I think I just deleted my slideshow here. 1 second, good people. 1 second, good people. Right here, and then maybe here. Nope. Before that. Nope. Before that. Right. Okay. So I think we're almost done with Confucius. There's just a few pages in the text I'd like you to read to sort of tie up this Confucian Taoist thing, and then we'll move on to Qin Dynasty. And like I mentioned, I do have some film for you to watch, which is a bit of a kind of a documentary, but we'll deal with that as we come to it. So just a few pages to read, a few questions to answer, and so maybe I'll give you 10 minutes to do that. We'll talk about the answers, and then maybe we can get to the film today if we're lucky, or if we're unlucky. What's that? I don't remember. It's probably 45 minutes, give or take. So yeah, not feature length, but not 10 minutes. Okay, let me put 10 minutes on the clock here. 10 minutes. Go. Okay, ready, Shreddies? Ready? Okay. Okay, so again, just a little quick section of the text on Confucianism and Daoism. We heard about both of these traditions in the video that we watched, and so a lot of that is repetition, but there's also some new information in there as well that might have been interesting. In the text here, they have kind of 5 Confucian statements, and so what did I ask you here? Okay, so what's the first statement about? Just in your own words. That's on page 128. Right. Yeah. He kind of redefines nobility, right? So the nobility, in many cases is, the people of high birth, right? The people that come from royal or noble families, right? And Confucius says, no, nobility isn't. It's not an ascribed status, it's an achieved status, right? And the way you achieve it is through righteous acts, right? By being a good, virtuous person, not simply by being a member of whatever family, right? So, yeah, that's an important thing, right? What's the second one about? Right? Right? So young people should be respectful towards their family and specifically to their parents and grandparents, right? Filial piety, right? So the respect and sort of the respect and power you give to your parents and to your grandparents, right? What else does he say here? Yeah, and this humanity starts at home, right? People who behave appropriately toward their parents will behave appropriately toward other people in society, right? What's number 3 about? Give me a little bit more than that. Well, I guess part of that is in there, right? So that golden rule is in there. What you would not want for yourself, do not do to others. What else is going on there, though? The noble man does not abandon humaneness for so much as the space of a meal. Right. You don't get to take any holidays from being humane and virtuous, right? You don't get to say, yes, I'm a humane, virtuous, empathetic person, except for the next hour, right? For the next hour, I'll do this really shitty thing, and then I'll do this really bad thing, and then but I'll go right back to being virtuous, right? And Confucius says, no, it doesn't. You don't get to do that. It doesn't work that way. You do not abandon your virtuousness and humanity, not even for the space of a meal, right? So not even for 20 minutes or however long it takes to eat, right? You have to do it all the time. What's number 4?
do you think like there's like other rulers whose rule have been seen from heaven?
Yeah, he kind of, well, I guess it depends how he uses that state. What's that? Yeah, he kind of almost is describing a little mini mandate of heaven, right? Is that, heaven has sort of told him or given him the responsibility to sort of go forth and teach people and help them to live a moral, virtuous life, right? So, yeah, he's almost kind of borrowing that idea a little bit.
Here in this way, I'm trying to do a change for society.
That's a good question actually. Is he trying, or do you think he was trying to change the society or rule it? Right? They certainly mention he was trying to kind of find his way into political office, right? He wanted to be an advisor to one of these vassal kings or whatever. He wasn't successful in that. Nobody really wanted to listen to him, but he did try, right? So
It's like when you ask us if we could work with Donald Trump to give best hand to others.
yeah,
It's like, follow me so I can give you better life.
yeah, could be, right? Yeah, I wonder what his kind of goals really were. If he actually did want to, did he just want to teach and advise people, or did he actually want to find himself, at the top of the pyramid kind of thing?
Because at the end, when he was not successful, he started traveling around. He did.
But at the end, he traveled around a lot, but politically wasn't very successful, and probably in terms of like seeing an impact in society, he had 70 students, but most people had probably never heard of him. So I don't think you could say that he didn't have a measurable impact on society at the time. You couldn't tell that he had done anything yet, I would think. What's that?
I have like a lot more to say about him.
Okay.
After like listening to
Okay. What? Give me. Say one other thing that you want to say about him.
they never mentioned about what other what rulers said about him. He was like sitting still in one place, and like after this, and he wasn't on this speaking,
Oh.
and he was kicked out.
Yeah. Was he kicked out?
Against the ruler.
That's possible.
They never mentioned that.
I think my perception based on what I've read and what I've heard is that he was trying to get himself hired as like an advisor to the king sort of thing and wasn't able to do it. Maybe people threw him out if he was annoying. I think he traveled around just trying to spread the word, and if you're in one kingdom and nobody listens to you, then you're like, okay, let's go to the next one and see if anyone will listen to us there. So I assume that's what it was, but I don't know for sure. He might have been a frustrating person to be around. I'm not entirely sure. I think in the documentary, Bethany sort of mentioned that he was not very tactful and a little bit overly direct sometimes. So some people might have found him a little bit annoying and maybe told him to find a new place to teach. What's the last one here? To govern is to rectify. If you lead the people by being rectified yourself, who will dare not be rectified? It's a lot of use of the word rectify. What does rectify mean? To what? To correct yourself. Anything else? Yeah, to be good in yourself, right? So to make sure you're behaving correctly and with morality and with virtue, right? And if to govern is to live that way, and if you live that way, then who will dare not also live that way, right? If you're a good ruler, if you're a good example, he says people will follow, right? People will follow your example, or at least that's what he.
Also, after the generation and the people and the government, whatever, people following you.
You have no trust in Confucius at all, do you? No. You think he has ulterior motives? It's very possible. Yeah, so this is that ruler as the father figure, right? If the ruler acts good and virtuous and with empathy and humanity, other people will follow his example, right? How does the text describe the Tao? They describe it as indescribable. That's an easy way out of. It's an easy way out of describing it, right? I can't describe it. What else do they say about it? Now you can say what?
What can I say? The textbook itself does not know what to say.
If the textbook does not know how to, what is it though? The Tao. Oh my God. Okay. It's the way, right? And it's sort of some sort of thing that gives birth to the universe, or, again, if you've ever watched Star Wars, I feel like it's kind of a force type thing. The Tao is the force, right? Some sort of thing that binds the universe together and structures it, right? And this is kind of interesting. How do these Taoists say that you align yourself with the Tao? You quiet your mind, you abandon your earthly desires. What does that almost sound like? Yeah, that almost sounds like what Buddha was saying, right? Is you have to give up attachment, right? You have to not be attached to things. You have to calm and quiet your mind. That's how you attain enlightenment. That's how you attain nirvana, right? And here the Taos are saying, yes, give up your earthly attachments, quiet your mind, and then you will be in alignment with the Tao, right? So again, these two traditions are using different words and it's kind of different ideas, but they're kind of circling around some of the same concepts, are they not? Yeah, it seems to evolve into that later, right? That's I guess question 4. We read about it slowly develops into almost a church, right? With priests and people going to heaven, realms of heaven and hell, and people being able to get out of that, and maybe people, being able to be immortal, and so a lot more. Which often happens with religion, right? You have sort of a core set of teachings, and then over the centuries, a lot of other stuff gets added on to it, right? And we see that with both forms of Buddhism, but we also see it with Taoism here. It starts out as kind of a pretty simple set of teachings, but then over the years, it continually develops and becomes more complicated. Yeah. Okie dokie. That's good. So the next thing here is, this is just stuff that we just talked about. The Tao. The goal of the Tao. Taoism. Oh yeah, but I'm not going to get you to read this. I will get you to read this before, because the film we have to watch will deal with the Qin dynasty and the first Qin emperor. So it will be nice to have a little bit of background in it, but I'm not going to ask you to do it today because I think this is probably a good place to end it for the weekend. I know we're a little early again, but sometimes that's how things just work. Huh? Super cool? Well, I don't know how super cool it is, but I think that, you know, we'll end it here. We'll take our weekend. We'll come back. We'll deal with Qin Dynasty, and then I'll show you some film, if you want to see it. If not, I will toss it aside and we'll move on. Or if you don't say anything and look at your desk, then I'll do whatever I please, I suppose. Okay, that is all for today. Pack it up. Have a great weekend. I will see you on Monday. The end.